Welcome, dear listeners, to another exhilarating quantum romp here on Impact Quantum. The podcast where entanglement isn't just a party trick, it's a career path. Today's episode features none other than the polymath of possibility himself, Christopher Bishop. TEDx speaker, futurist, deep tech MC, and host of Qubit Confidential, he's had more careers than most people have cups of tea. From rocking stages with ZZ Top to helping IBM navigate the information superhighway back when modem was a household word, Christopher's journey is the very definition of nonlinear. Joining our hosts Frank Larvine and Candice Gilhooly, who between them could probably boot up a qubit using a toaster, and sheer determination, we dive into the quantum workforce of tomorrow. The skills you didn't know you had. And how not to let your career be upended by the next breakthrough in physics. So grab your favorite beverage, prepare for some brain entanglement. And let's get curious about the careers that don't exist yet, but might, just after this episode.
Hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of quantum computing, the careers and all sorts of types that it's going to take to build out this new industry. And with me, as always, is the most quantum curious person I know, Candice Gilhooly. How's it going, Candice?
It's great. Thank you, Frank. I'm very excited about today. We're going to speak with Christopher Bishop, who is an author, is a TEDx speaker, is a career futurist, and a deep tech MC. He's also the podcast host of Qubit Confidential. Hi, Christopher. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, Candice. Hi, Frank. Thanks for inviting me to join you. Delighted to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Welcome to the show. And we actually met in person in DC at the quantum event.
We did.
It was my first solely quantum computing conference. I'd been at quantum talks that were part of a much larger Microsoft kind of AI thing. But I think what moved me to speak to you was you were talking about your new book, which is very, I think, timely for anyone, mid-career, early career. I have a kid in high school now, and as he kind of picks what AP courses he's taken, it makes me wonder, with AI on the rise, like, what does the future of careers look like?
Yeah, so I have a lot of friends and colleagues who think of me as sort of a quantum guy. So as Candice mentioned, I host Qubit Confidential, a podcast where I interview C-suite execs at leading quantum companies. Did a really fascinating one with Zulfi Alam, who's the corporate vice president of quantum at Microsoft. But I also act as the MC for various quantum events, for the Economist Commercializing Quantum event in London. Frank, where we met, was in DC at the Quantum Tech USA event. But that's sort of my eighth career, if you will. I describe myself as a nonlinear multimodal careerist. So I've had 8 careers so far, kind of working on 9 now as a published author. But I was a touring rock musician in the 1970s. I have a degree in German literature from a small liberal arts school in Vermont, Bennington College.
Oh, wow.
I toured with this band and opened for the Eagles and ZZ Top and Fleetwood Mac, Weather Report, some bands you might have heard of. Did 3 albums with them, moved to New York, became a studio musician, played with Robert Palmer, did 2 tours and a live album in London with him, playing bass and keyboards and guitar. Did a gig with Chuck Berry at the Meadowlands in front of 18,000 people with no rehearsal. He turns around and says to the band, "Hey, you guys know these tunes, right?" And we're like, "Yeah, that's why we're here, Chuck. Go ahead, count it off, man. We're in." Became fascinated, wanted to get off the road. So the way to do it is to become a studio musician. So I asked my friends in New York, I was living in Manhattan at the time, came off the road, said to my friends, "How do I sleep in my own bed at night?" They said, "Jingles, man, you got to break into the session scene." So I broke in first as a player and then as an arranger and a composer, finally as a producer, running a synclavier, which was a state-of-the-art digital musical instrument at the time. Played bass and sang on the first Kit Kat jingle. "Give me a break, oh, give me a break.
Oh, wow.
Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar." That was kind of cool. Became intrigued by this wacky thing called the World Wide Web. We were talking about that earlier. Taught myself to be a web producer, worked with a couple of seminal agencies in New York, and then much to my surprise was hired into IBM, into corporate internet programs. And I worked at IBM for 15 years in a bunch of different roles, strategy roles, exec comms roles. And then retired about 10 years ago after I'd done a TEDx talk in New York at the Times Center. I got a practitioner residency from the Rockefeller Foundation, spent a month in Bellagio, Italy at their Bellagio Center in a 15th century Lombard villa, working on my book and working on lecture materials. Anyway, and now I'm talking to you. I'm sort of into the quantum space. But in the meantime, I wrote a book, which is called Improvising Careers, Succeed at Jobs That Don't Exist Yet. And it's out now. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Waterstones for listeners in the UK. And I do lectures. I did a lecture at Oxford, actually, last month. At St. Cross College. I've done it at Bayes, London School of Economics. So anyway, that's sort of a long-winded answer to your question. But quantum, certainly for quantum curious, I became curious about quantum by getting a press pass to an event in Boston about 5 years ago that Inside Quantum Technology was producing. I went up there and was just captivated. It was like, this is cool. This is going to be really interesting. This is going to impact how we live and work. Plus, fair to say, two of the execs leading the charge at the time, Christopher Savoy at Zapata and William Worley at Strangeworks, are both bass players.
Really?
So right away we had back and, hey, man, who do you listen to?
It's fascinating because there is definitely an overlap I've noticed between certain hobbies. Certain hobbies in the tech space tend to repeat a lot. Musicians tend to be one of them, and the other is carpentry, oddly enough. I've noticed that kind of like as a pattern. I don't fit. I'm not good at music or carpentry, but I did grow a garden this year, and I've done some gardening in the past, and I try to fix up old cars, but my skills are not good.
Old cars. I mean, mechanical engineering, kind of gearheads, guys and gals that like machines and how you build machines and stuff, I think also are drawn to science on some level, because there's science everywhere. As Stephanie Simmons says, it's all about human progress is all based on the commercializing of physics.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it.
That's certainly
and you've had an amazing career. I mean, it's impressive the things the variety and scope of the things you've done, and I think when you go back in time, I think our parents' generation really had that idea where you go to school, you study X, Y, or Z, and you get a career in X, Y, or Z, right? Yeah. And I think for a certain point in history, I think that worked. But I don't think that's the case anymore. In fact, if you look at me up on LinkedIn, like I'm a technical marketing manager, right? I never thought I would be in marketing, right? Let alone talking about quantum computing, let alone talking about artificial intelligence. I originally went to university not that far from Westchester County, Fordham in the Bronx. So a lot of my comp sci professors were adjunct professors from IBM or retired from IBM. Yeah,
that's a great school, sure.
Oh, well, thank you. I originally went there to be a chemical engineer because my mom had worked like 20 years at a big German chemical company.
Cool.
And her vision for me was become a chemical engineer, become a big shot at said company, work there 20 years and all that. And when I switched to computer science, and this was 1991, I had to convince them that computer science was a legitimate field of study.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And a viable career path, which, now we laugh at such a concept.
Right.
Although there was a study out this year about the employability of like comp sci majors, but maybe we can get into that. But yeah, I mean, I had to convince them that it was a viable thing because my parents basically made it very clear to me that, my career options were doctor, lawyer, engineer, or if I didn't like any of those, they said there was a, Marine Corps recruiting station like 5 blocks away. Yeah. So,
yeah. No, well, I think, certainly the model has changed. The rate and pace at a meta perspective, which businesses are changing and technology is influencing how we work, and by inference, the careers that are available and jobs and skills, that are needed, are morphing at a rate and pace we've never seen in history. I mean, but that said, it's also been going on for literally hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. I mean, when I do these lectures, for example, I lead off by saying, humans have been using technology since we were wandering around in the Pleistocene wilderness trying to kill something bigger than us so we could eat it and use its fur for clothing. And the technology, state of the art at that time, was like a long stick with a sharp end. Right. And if you knew how to use that, you were employable. You had a job. You were like valuable to the community. Nowadays, it's manipulating subatomic particles to get them to, store and retrieve information safely in the quantum space. So again, the big picture perspective is it's always been like this, but it's just faster and more interesting, I think, nowadays than it's ever been.
No, that's a good way to put it. I'm sorry, Candace.
Okay, so let me ask you, in your workshops on how to succeed at jobs that don't exist yet, you talk about emerging quantum roles. Which non-technical roles are most underserved in quantum today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I'm a member of the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, QEDC. I was in their Workforce Technology Advisory Committee. And I've done talks that I call Secrets to Working in Quantum. And by the way, if any listeners are curious, I'd be happy to, be contacted about doing that. I've done it for many universities, also for QEDC settings. But the idea is all of these companies, whether they're IBM or they're Xanadu, are businesses, right? So while at the core, there may be the need for condensed matter physicists, for sure, and electrical engineers and software developers, computer science majors, whatever. That's the core of it. But at the end of the day, you've got to bring something to market. So you need executives to run the company. With all due respect to many founders and startup leaders, I mean, they maybe come from academia or they come from a different setting than sort of tech marketing, if you will. So you need some execs, adult supervision to kind of run the business, how to manage a P&L. You need biz dev people, someone who's going to go to a client with the value prop and get them to open their checkbook. You need UX design people. I mean, human-computer interface, how do you touch this stuff? How do you turn it on? How do you turn it off? How do you interact with it? How do you set the photon detector? How do you turn on the dill fridge? You need people interested in having policy and regulatory conversations. You need people who are into the picks and shovels, building lasers and test benches and optical gear. You need PR and comms people. Who's going to write about this in a way that lay audiences can understand so that you increase visibility and adoption and understanding more broadly across the global community. All the major consulting firms, the big five, McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte, on and on, all have practice areas in quantum. So if you're interested in that kind of approach, and all the major banks, big news this week was that Marco Pistola left JP Morgan Chase and went to IonQ. So sort of from the client to the vendor, that's again a model. So all by saying there are lots of roles if you're interested in working in quantum. Which ones are underserved? I think it varies company by company, Candace, to be candid. Some companies have poached like CMO level marketing people, for example, C-suite people from tech companies to help them run the business. Certainly there's a need for physicists, people with training in quantum, but also people who can learn how to talk about the business value of quantum. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer, but I think the net is there's lots of opportunity for people who are interested in working in quantum. It's getting a lot of focus. This is the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology, right? The UN has declared that. We're seeing a lot of funding rounds go by. People are getting infusions of cash to build out their companies. We're seeing companies on acquisition sprees. IonQ has bought like 3 or 4 companies in the past like 6 months or whatever. So
They're
anyway,
in the news every day. It feels
yeah,
like, but they're just exploding with excitement, you know?
yeah, it's cool. So if you're into it, explore it. And I also, again, the risk of, unabashed self-promotion, I curate a Google sheet for the QEDC that lists career pages for over 140 quantum companies over the world. I just do it, I put it together for them as part of this office hours program that I ran, where we used to hold monthly mentoring sessions for students in quantum with executives in the private sector, members of QEDC. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to send you that link, or I can give it to you. We can put it in the
In the
materials.
show notes. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I can,
Yeah.
no, my kind of quantum aha moment was I was at Microsoft and actually back when I was doing civic tech and social responsibility and stuff like that. And I was just floored. It was actually an AI conference, and the second day keynote was about hardware. And I was actually about to skip out because I'm like, duh, just get more GPUs, right? But then when the person talked about um, look, we can build, we can throw all the GPUs together, all these things we want, but we're not going to be able to keep up with the demands. And then they said that there's a new radical way to do computation, and this quantum. And the pitch was very, very impressive, and it got me not just aware of it, but also very interested in the technology.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's the potential is quite remarkable. I have to confess, I may not live to see all of it, but I hope to see some of it. I mean, it's exciting to be, in the nascent stages of this technology. It's going to change everything. A friend of mine who's a professor at Oxford wrote an essay sort of about this, and the basic premise was he's hoping to have a conversation with his grandson at some point, who poses the question, "So, Grandpa, what was cancer?"
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, we
Right.
we we figured that out with quantum.
Right.
Like we were able to like get that sorted. You know.
And to that point, we had a fantastic episode with a gentleman by the name of Marvin Weinstein,
Hmm.
who is specifically working with this biology and quantum intersection,
Cool.
specifically with geoblastomas and cancer research. And what they're discovering using, simulated quantum algorithms is just mind blowing,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah.
you realize, it shows you what quantum can be used for. Because as Frank and I are constantly talking about it, it's not going to replace everything. It's going to
Yeah.
solve problems that we can't solve right now in certain regards, right? But it's not
Yeah.
going to be,
Well, think it'll
replacing.
always be sort of hybrid systems, right? That there'll be, and they're already sort of exploring HPC and quantum interaction,
Mhm.
right? Interoperability. So putting some kind of quantum based compute environment in a data center, a server farm, whatever, and passing off problems that the quantum computer can solve more efficiently to the quantum computer, and then pulling the data back and having an HPC instantiation do what it does best. So I think it's going to be that kind of connectivity and interoperation. No, it's exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely, it sounds crazy to us to say like what was cancer, but you think about historically, like what's smallpox, like what's this, what's
Oh
that,
yeah,
like these are
yeah.
things you really. What's the other one that President Roosevelt had?
Polio.
Polio,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Hmm.
And my grandparents and parents would talk about like that was a big deal, like at
Oh
one
yeah.
point, like
Oh yeah.
and I mean, I don't even think my kids even know what that is, and I only know what it is because of the history of the president, like
Right.
studying
Yeah,
history
yeah,
at polio.
yeah.
So, like, I mean, it's just you can easily imagine this being a thing, a relic of the past. And I
Yeah.
also think too that when the transistor was developed, no one was thinking about YouTube, TikTok, or let alone podcasts, right? Like, so who knows what
Sure.
sorts of things we really can't imagine now
Yeah.
could be built in the future with quantum technology.
So I have to share another sort of anecdote or aphorism from my lecture. I show a slide of a typewritten version of Intel. I think it's Intel's first business plan, and
Really?
it describes that they're going to make sensors and magnetometer kind of devices and whatever. And the part that I sort of circled in this slide is it's even anticipated that some of our customers will be outside of California. And it was like, really, man? Because it was
That's
so
hilarious.
niche, it was focused on
Right.
sort
It
of
was so niche.
it was focused
Okay.
on the defense industry, which was kind of in Silicon Valley or whatever. NASA was there. But isn't that, again, for perspective, right? So imagine that was their worldview in 1971 or whatever, where they thought they might sell stuff in another state, maybe somebody could use this somewhere outside of the South Bay. I don't know.
Right. Well, even like one of the big shots at IBM was quoted at one point saying that there may be a market for 4 or 5 computers worldwide or something,
Right.
something
Yeah.
like ridiculous sounding, right? And there's
Yeah.
always the famous quote about Bill Gates saying 640K ought to be enough memory for anyone, right?
Yeah.
These things are very
Yeah.
mobile.
Yeah. Well, for sure, which is exciting, I think.
Right.
So
Yeah.
let me ask you, in university workshops, you counsel students entering quantum careers. What practical advice would you give to people who come from the non-technical backgrounds who want to contribute?
Yeah, another great question. First of all, be aware, as I said, you don't have to have a PhD in, particle physics to play a role. I would say, again, at a meta level, be curious. It's gotta tie to some passion or interest that you have. If you're not interested in the topic, you're not going to be successful at it, right? So, but if you bring curiosity to bear, explore how you can take existing skills that are going to be transferable and then figure out what you don't know and acquire those skills, and then you'll be successful. I mean, that's again a meta message from my lecture, right? Is you're going to always have skills that you can use for some part of a job or a role, and there are always going to be skills you're going to have to acquire that you don't know how to do. We've all had those experiences, Candace and Frank. I mean, just from our conversations, we've all had to learn stuff. We know how to do stuff. We had to learn how to do other stuff. So don't be put off by it, listeners, dear listeners. Look for what you know how to do. If you're passionate and excited about it, look for a role. As my friend at IBM says, keep jiggling doorknobs. It's not magic. You just got to keep pursuing, waiting for the tectonic plates of the job economy to kind of shift in your direction. But there are lots of ways to get involved. So I would say, figure out what skill you have, learn enough about quantum so that you can speak even just at a meta level about what it is and how it works. The sort of 4 main areas I described as quantum computing, quantum clocks and sensors, quantum networks, and now post-quantum cryptography. Those are sort of 4 meta categories where they need smart people like your listeners looking for work to play a role. And they're big companies and they're small companies. IBM stood up a quantum safe practice in like 3 months because they saw there was addressable opportunity and they have the brain power and the money and took it to market. And they have the trusted relationships with clients, but also Sandbox AQ, which was spun out of Google a couple of years ago, is now doing incredible business in post-quantum cryptography with most of the major U.S. government agencies, DOD, DOC, DOE, right? And then there's lots of startups. Crypt, this fantastic quantum safe company in New York. Dennis Manage is the CEO. He was a national security guy for years, and it was so appalled by the rate and pace at which countries and non-state actors were stealing or attempting to steal data that he left and started a company to put some process in place to protect the data. So lots of ways, quantum sensors. I don't know if you listeners are aware of Q Control. It's an Australian company that just put together a viable option for GPS denied environments. where the Russians are jamming or denying access to GPS. There's sort of a red line I saw on this chart recently. It's similar to where the Iron Curtain was, and that's where Russians are jamming communication protocols. So, but anyway, Q Control has put together this quantum-based magnetometry, gravimetry solution that they proved is as good or better with a commercial airline recently. So anyway, I'm droning on, but
No,
Well,
it's all
that's
exciting
a
stuff.
very valid point, because there was a documentary or news story on, how dangerous it is to fly within a certain mileage of
Mhm.
the Black Sea and Ukraine. Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
if you look at flight radar and the tracking of the pass, obviously they avoid Ukrainian airspace, but you'll also see like there's a significant buffer zone, and it really has more to do with GPS jamming. And they were on I think it might have been a Finnish airline going from like Helsinki to Dubai, and like they basically had to do this massive like roundabout thing, and the pilot was explaining like, look, now our GPS is broken.
yeah, yeah,
So now we're going to fly this way until we can like get the signal again. And it's, GPS technology is a really good example of a military technology that has been, civilianized. I don't know if that's a
yeah,
word.
yeah, yeah. It is
And
now.
to a degree, it is now. Yeah, yeah. To a degree, and everything is dependent on it, right? From Uber to just
Yeah.
basic
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Amazing.
If I want to track my Amazon package, that's like it's
Yeah.
that, and like obviously it's obviously it's a it's I wouldn't say it's a fair target, but when a GPS jammer is out there, it's not going to avoid civilian um, uses, right? It's just going to take over the whole spectrum. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so having alternatives to GPS,
Yeah.
is definitely
So, and again, thinking of it in terms of opportunities, like job opportunities. I mean, that's
right.
that's a burgeoning space. That's going to be an important area of focus and investment and business advantage, business value. So again, listeners interested in that space, get a hold of Michael Biersick at Q Control.
There you go. There you go.
Well, and that's also interesting because, because you speak to this, the job market and what people can do. What signals or weak trends are you currently tracking that might hint at where the quantum job market is heading?
I think one of the most underexplored or underexploited areas of quantum is networking. So there are a couple companies. I mean, QNect in New York and the Brooklyn Navy Yard, led by a fantastic woman CEO, Noel Goddard. They've demonstrated, quantum safe communications on existing fiber through Verizon. There's a company in the UK, New Quantum, led by another woman, Carmen Bellaccio, and they're looking at what they call entanglement fabric. So it's ways to use photons to connect machines. So my contention is, for example, once quantum networking gets sorted, things like QKD are going to go away because it's physics and it's breakable. So when they can put up networks of distributed quantum computers, that's going to really be transformative. It'll be certainly part of broader communication kinds of applications. But the ability to connect quantum computers using some kind of entanglement fabric or a quantum network or whatever is really going to be amazingly impactful. It's kind of not particularly sexy or fancy schmancy, but the potential impact is tremendous. I think. I mean, my take on it. So I would encourage people to investigate that if that's sort of an underexplored area, if you will. That's going to have huge impact.
And QKD, just for those who are wondering what that is, I'm assuming you mean quantum key distribution
Yeah,
for cryptography.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I don't mean to disparage, ID Quantique or any of the companies that are doing great work in that space. And I think there'll probably always be a need for some kind of solution like that. But again, when quantum networks become viable, it's going to be less and less likely because it's going to be comparatively much too complicated. And it requires physical devices and is potentially hackable on some level. I'm going to
Well,
probably
key
get a
distribution is
call
always
from QKD
key.
advocates after this.
So you're going to get some interesting phone calls when this goes out.
Like,
But
hey!
in fairness, though, like key distribution has always like been the Achilles heel of any cryptography system, right?
Yeah.
If you ever read the Bruce Schneier book, which is an
I've-
excellent read,
And I've heard of it. What's the title of it?
it's called Applied Cryptography.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I remember reading that the first edition in like the 90s. It's an old book, but like it's about as thorough as you can get. And like one of the things was he talks about cryptanalysis and how do you break cryptography. And there was a whole thing of like, look, just because your algorithm and your cryptography thing is unbreakable, in air quotes, doesn't mean your system's secure, because how are you going to get the keys around? Managing the keys is not a trivial process. And not most, but I mean, a lot of the crypto attacks tend to come from finding weaknesses in how keys are distributed.
Yeah.
And, whether that's, it's saved on a Post-it, somebody's desk, all the way to kind of, rating memory spaces and things like that. Most of this stuff is that has always been a major flaw, right? So like it's not. So if you can find any kind of technology that can remove key distribution from any crypto system, whether it's quantum, whether it's conventional, that's a point of failure that you're getting rid of. Well, there are obvious logistics around like how that's possible, and that's when I'm afraid my migraine will return once I get into that.
Oh no.
But yeah, no, I remember reading that book, and then I think it was my wife had said she'd read it, and I was like, that is definitely a woman I should marry. So
really, wow.
Yeah. Well, because in the early 2000s, I kind of found myself, doing contract work and thinking like there was an opportunity to get into. It actually worked out really well, even though we didn't get the contract. But we tried to. I applied for an SBIR, Small Business Innovation something, because they were really worried about steganographic leaks of data, which is basically steganography is this idea of you embed data inside of other data. So you would have like plans for the stealth fighter and a JPEG of who's that lady that's doing the jeans ad that everyone's like happy about, mad about, something Sweeney. Anyway, yeah. Trying to put a pop culture reference in here, and it's not working.
Yeah.
But like, so like, the idea that you could embed data inside of other data, and how would you detect that, right? So that's when I saw that as a fascinating thing, and it ended up being really well. Even though we didn't get the contract, we didn't like win the bid. I learned so much about advanced mathematics in C# and like applying these types of like edge case algorithms in C# and in .NET that actually boosted my career
good.
in the .NET space. So when I started getting into like handwriting recognition systems and electronic medical records stuff, I'm like, when I was interviewing, I was like, yeah, I know this because I'm like, it's not necessarily the average bear would know, right? It was because most people were like, hey, look, let me show you how I built this website in .NET, right? And I was like, no, I was doing some weird kind of mathematical computations.
But back to our earlier conversation about transferable skills and learning new skills in kind of a maybe in this case an unlikely setting, maybe that you were then able to leverage in your next role.
Exactly, and I think as I kind of think about what you said and the topics your book brings up, I'm like, like that's how you have to think. You have to think about not so much education per se. It's more about skill acquisition, right? So it's like, it's a bit like Minecraft, right? Like you kind of, I'm going to use that, and feel free to use that too, because it's not so much that you take this little bit of skill, this little bit of skill, this little bit of skill, and then you can fashion something new, which may or may not be useful in the future. I think you almost have to think entrepreneurially like that way.
Yeah. I mean, one of the sections of my lectures around sort of education, and I say we have to stop thinking of education as an event that happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lifelong process, learning, unlearning, relearning. I actually learned that at Bennington. I have to, a little plug for my alma mater. But as a junior, you were required to put together a plan about what you were going to learn and study and who was going to teach you, and then defend it in front of a tribunal like the president and some faculty and staff. So I've sort of taken that approach and used it for many, many years in the workplace.
Wow.
So let me ask you, so if quantum computing becomes as ubiquitous as cloud or AI, how do we ensure equitable access to prevent a second digital divide?
Well, I think it's going on already, unfortunately. There's a lot of conversations around how do we, to your point, Candace, how do we make sure it's distributed, especially in like the global South, for example, right? Or in underserved communities, more micro. I think it's an ongoing challenge. I think of One Laptop per Child, the Nicholas Negroponte initiative back in the 80s, I guess, when he was running the MIT Media Lab. It takes focus as a culture, as a society, to try to make sure that this technology, this compute power is, available where it should be available. I think also there's going to be a certain amount of invisibility to it, right? So another sort of aphorism is that the best technology is invisible. I used to say at IBM, like when you make toast, and you plug in your toaster, you don't really care where the electricity is coming from. You just want it to make the toast. So I think we're going to see quantum in a similar kind of model. Like certainly researchers will be using it in esoteric academic settings or in labs or even in R&D environments at the enterprise. But if you want to like put your photos on whatever's after Instagram goes out of business, there may be some quantum solution that will help you do that, and you won't even know or care. Okay. It's going to be, like whatever's going to replace GPS, you won't care. You just want to be able to get to, Aunt Mill's house without running into a tree. I mean, it's like whatever's the solution is that's giving you the right answer, the right capability. Quantum will be involved for sure. I mean, it'll be involved in medical for sure. Like no one will care that a quantum computer helped design the next mRNA and vaccine or help deal with the next cure for some intractable condition, right? I mean, that's my hope, is it'll be sort of subsumed into our everyday interaction. Like as we're having this conversation in Microsoft Teams, thank you, Satya, but I don't know where the data is going or where it's coming from or,
right. Where it's being stored or
exactly
whatever.
Where the server farm is, or if it's working or broken. It seems to be working, so that's a good thing. I mean, so anyway, just that's sort of my take on where, again, at a meta level, I don't think it answers your question directly, Candace, but the idea is let's try to work toward getting it almost subsumed into the compute environment globally, so anybody who needs it can use it. And it takes big companies, and it takes sovereign focus, country focus for sure. But again,
well,
at the
that's
end of
one
the day,
of the things we've noticed, and this has led Candace to do a lot of her marketing background comes in to help us. She's been doing a lot of these country reports because unlike, say what you want about conventional semiconductors, right? They are developed they really started in Silicon Valley, maybe Bell Labs, right? Texas had a thing, but it ultimately is consolidated.
Was there, and Hewlett Packard was there.
Hewlett Packard, but it's also consolidated to basically Taiwan and parts of East Asia, which may or may not. Well, they're all subject to earthquakes and tsunamis and all this, but also there's some geopolitical aspects to it, right? And I think that when we look at quantum, like where are the hotspots of quantum? They're not localized. And I think that's great. There's some in Maryland, there's some in Illinois, there's in Montreal, there's, New York, there's Tel Aviv, there's, there's no one central place where this is happening, because I think governments and research institutions have realized that they missed a huge opportunity with silicon.
Yeah. I think that's the challenge is, keeping it as a global community, right? And especially when you're talking about business models, right? Because
Right.
proprietary IP is what allows companies to go to market and take, get clients and take market share based on what they do better than their competitor or whatever. But I find generally, if there's sounding simplistic, the quantum community is pretty collegial. It's pretty open-minded. Other companies, obviously, some VCs might say they're all chasing the same clients on some level. But I think we're seeing it evolve more and more into vertical specific kinds of solutions. This is me waxing philosophical. I'll get on my soapbox for a minute here. I think 5 years ago, when I first got involved in quantum, you could sort of say, oh, we have this quantum computer. It's going to, do remarkable things. We're going to get quantum supremacy. It's going to, Google claims it solves a problem in 200 seconds that would have taken a classical computer 10,000 years. And that benchmark has been moved up, many times since then. But I think nowadays it's like, so what are you going to do for me in my business? Because all companies go to market in a vertical, right? They're either in telco or, media and entertainment or energy and utilities or pharma or legal, whatever. So now they're like, okay, it's been 5 years, guys. What are you going to do to solve my pain points, right? I got these 5 things. These are the 5 alligators that are closest to the canoe. So how are we going to deal with these? So, which I think is a good thing. And I think the challenge is for the quantum community to kind of step up and address it. And I have to say, a little plug for Quantum Tech Europe, the event I'm going to be at the end of September in Rotterdam. They've done just that. They've designed an event that's focused on verticals, as well as there's going to be a quantum boardroom track that I'm going to help lead. There's going to be pharma, finance. So again, we're getting more specific now, which I think is challenging, but also exciting, right?
No, for sure. It's a fascinating time and place to be, for sure.
So since there's so much out there, and your own journey is about continuous reinvention, right? So how do you personally stay sharp and inspired across such a diverse and prolific career?
Well, again, I'd say probably the key is that I'm a curious person. Right. So I would encourage listeners, be curious. And it's a muscle you can flex. It's a skill you can acquire and finesse and refine, I used to say more practically, again, having spent 15 years at IBM, I'd say to new hires or whatever, colleagues, after 18 months in your job, once you kind of get settled and know who the players are, where the bodies are buried and what the daily task requirements are, start looking for what's next. And I would say the same is true in quantum. I mean, be curious and look for what your next opportunity is. The other thing I'd say is put together, and as part of my toolkit, I have something in the book called the Future Career Toolkit. It has 3 tools: voice, antenna, and mesh. I developed them after giving a lecture at a millennial workplace in New York. And it was sort of, quasi-esoteric. It was my story and my sort of perspective on where jobs and careers are being created at the intersection of historically unconnected disciplines, whatever. And this woman stood up in the back and said, so how do we do it? And it's like, that's a good question. Let me get back to you on that. So anyway, I got together with this ideation guru, a friend of mine here in Connecticut, who does creativity sessions for clients like LVMH and Walmart and Kroger. And we put together this toolkit. So anyway, the tools are, I'm pitching the book now, so forgive me. Voice is using triggers like finding your favorite TV show, movie, book, or game, and what about it resonates with you. That's a way to trigger what you're interested in, what you find fascinating. Antenna is the second tool, which is looking for where these conversations are going on. It could be elite newspapers, could be TikTok, could be your grandma, could be your neighbor, could be Instagram, whatever. Could be someone on a Discord server, someone playing World of Warcraft with you. Where are these conversations around the triggered out focus areas going on? And then the third tool is Mesh, which is building out like a network, a mega network. I always tell these kids, if you get to Friday at 5 o'clock and you haven't added 5 people to your LinkedIn network, stop what you're doing, put down the switch to, log out of Netflix, stop binge watching, step away from sniping on Amazon or eBay, make a cup of coffee and put some Boolean parameters into LinkedIn and find people based on, what you discovered in the other two tools, um, and track down real people and introduce yourself. Like there's always, I always say to these kids, there's always a Miles Davis in every genre, every discipline, every vertical. And many of them scratch their heads and go, who, what? So then I say, look it up. I say, so for contemporary reference, there's a Taylor Swift, there's a Tony Hawk, there's a Serena Williams, whatever. Somebody leading the conversation at the top of the function. Find out who that is and follow them. Connect with them if you can. I mean, Satya Nadella is leading the charge on AI and quantum at Microsoft. He probably won't accept your connection request, but at least follow him and follow the Microsoft, communication, their marketing, their blogs, whatever, their LinkedIn posts. So that there are ways to do it. The great news is there's lots of ways to get information about bleeding edge tech. The bad news is there's lots of ways to get information about bleeding edge tech. The challenge is putting together doing the triage, some kind of, way to manage the tsunami of data, but make it a job. Anyway.
No, I mean, that's a good way to
great
put
advice.
it. No, it's a great advice. And, I definitely think that we could spend a lot more time talking about this. And where can folks, because I want to be respectful of your time, and I see we're coming up to an hour on the thing. Where can folks find out more about you, your book, and what you're up to?
So first thing I would say is please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. I think it's the pleated pants of social networks. It's the lingua franca. It's the coin of the realm. It's like certainly young professionals, anybody who's a millennial, early or mid-career person, or even Gen Z getting into the workforce. I mean, you've got to have a pimped out LinkedIn profile. Just saying. It's not an option. It's like breathing and spell checking. It's gotta happen. So connect with me on LinkedIn. My book is available on Barnes and Noble, and I prefer to point people there because that's a real store. It's a bricks and mortar store. They have salespeople. They have vested interest in maintaining a physical environment where you can go and sit and read a book or have a coffee or take your kids and story time, whatever, as opposed to, this is advice from my publisher, as opposed to Amazon, which is just an algorithm. They don't give a crap. Doesn't matter to them one bit. It's just, you're just a data point.
It's fair.
Yeah. So
I'm a big fan of Barnes and Noble. Personally, I was the first webmaster there. So
really,
yeah.
Wow,
so
cool.
I always like going to Barnes and Noble. Even when we used to have a Borders and a Barnes and Noble next to each other down here in Maryland, I would always gravitate towards the Barnes and Noble. But yeah, no, and I was there actually this past weekend actually. So
really, how cool. Yeah. I actually took my book down there. There's one in Stamford, Connecticut, not too far from me. I went in and said, here's my book, please order it. I want you to stock it. I live nearby and I'd like to see it on the shelves when I come in here. So LinkedIn, cool. Buy the book. If you follow me, I do a lot of speaking at events. I'm again deep tech MC. I work for The Economist, for Quantum Tech, done some work for Inside Quantum Technology. So if and when you're at an event that I'm at, please come up and say hello, introduce yourself. Be delighted to talk to you and get better acquainted. And the other thing I say is if there are opportunities where a lecture titled How to Succeed at Jobs That Don't Exist Yet would be interesting, get in touch with me. I do them in university settings. I've done them in 7th grade career day settings. I've done them at Right Management, which is an outplacement firm for senior execs. So I have sort of versions of it that are consumable for all kinds of audiences. And that's something I'm really passionate about doing. So
cool.
Fantastic.
Any parting thoughts, Candace?
This has been fantastic, and I really feel that you really went across the bridge to show how everybody can be involved in the quantum ecosystem without having to be a PhD or a physicist, and to take what their skills are and to apply their skills to a burgeoning industry that's open and excited for more people to become a part of it. So I loved it. I thought this was a great, great, great call.
Excellent. And we'll
Great.
let our AI finish the show.
And there we have it, from bass guitars to quantum bits. Christopher Bishop has once again proven that career paths are more zigzag than zipline. If you've ever felt like your resume resembles a Jackson Pollock painting, fret not. You may be on the quantum frontier and not even know it. Huge thanks to our brilliant guest for reminding us that the future of work isn't just about learning to code or growing a beard like an AI researcher. It's about curiosity, adaptability, and a very good LinkedIn game. Be sure to connect with Christopher, buy his book Improvising Careers. And remember, quantum may be weird, but your career doesn't have to be, as long as you're paying attention. For more entangled discussions and lightspeed wit, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Or don't. I'm an AI, I won't lose sleep over it. Until next time, I'm Bailey. And this has been Impact Quantum, where your future is uncertain, but definitely exciting.